growing up. Not many of you know this, but his name is Jacob Gordon. And we all grew up with him, and finally he was out of the house when we were about 25. And little did we know that we had this other member of our family that was growing for quite some time. And I think that it is an incredibly courageous thing to do, to write a book that you put this much time and thought and research and effort into. And we're all friends and family, and we all love you dearly, and we're very, very proud of you.
Thank you, Steve.
Now, without further ado, the woman of the hour, Beth Kaplan, everybody.
That's my greatest creation, the two of them there.
Anna left, so.
Here's the third. This one. Can you, maybe I'm slightly not quite as tall. Thank you. I just have to take this in for a minute. Oh God, no, I can't cry, but it's quite overwhelming to see this many wonderful faces. As some very dear friends of mine said once, you're such a lovely audience. We'd like to take you home with us. We'd love to take you home. So if I could take you home, I would. Thank you all so much for coming. I'm going to talk a little bit about the book, and I'm going to read a bit from the book. But first, I'd just like to have my Oscar moment and give a few thanks. I'd like to thank all the people at the local guest who have done who have done a wonderful job with the food and this really welcoming environment. So thank you guys very much. I'd like to thank all of the people who helped me with this book, and there are hundreds of them, many of them not here, people who read it, people who put up with me talking about it, all my students who are here who heard me read from it at least once or twice or 4 times for many years. So thanks to all of you and to the volunteers tonight who are helping keep this thing rolling. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank my publisher, Don Bastian, who was going to be here, but his grandson was due today. So I think he's not here. So thanks to Don and to his design team. And to my wonderful friend, Alana Kavanaugh, who is here somewhere. Where is Alana? Right there. This is Alana's cover, and it's a thing of beauty. I just love it. And Alana's also designing the cover of my next book, which is coming out in August. So we can do this all over again. So, let me check, have I, yes. Oh yes, and I also wanted to give you guys a bulletin because I know you all are all very, very worried about the fact that Paul McCartney was quite sick this week. But I want you all to know the latest report is that he is much better. So stop worrying right now. He's fine. Well, I know, he was invited, but unfortunately he's in South Korea. What can you do? You know, he's a busy guy, but you never know. I'm trying to get a book to him, so we'll see. So when I set out to, I thought I wanted to do something with these amazing years, 1964, 65, when I was 13, 14. And I had 2 great resources when I started work. One is that I was a writing child. So that is, I started reading at about 5 and I started writing at about 6. And I started to write stories and letters and poems. I was just a child who translated every single thing that happened to me to paper. It was just an automatic thing. And so I wrote and I wrote and I wrote. And then the second resource I had is that I was a pack rat child with a pack rat mother. And so not only did I write constantly, but I kept everything that I wrote, and so did my mother. In fact, many of you know that my mother died recently, and among her possessions, as I was going through them, I found every single letter that I wrote to her for my entire life. And I wrote her a lot of letters. So I now own this giant box full of everything I ever wrote. So I had a lot of resources when I started to write this book, which is why the quotes in the book are verbatim verbatim. I was able to take my diaries, my letters and stories from that time and quote them exactly. So this is what I found out as I started to do the work, that really in 1964, 3 major things happened to me. The first was on January 14th, when I was 13 and a half. And I know that exactly because I had a diary. And that is the day that I heard the Beatles sing She Loves You. And at 5 to 7, I was a 13-year-old girl. And at 5 after 7, I was a teenager and a Beatlemaniac. It happened like that. It was absolutely amazing. And then a few weeks later, I fell in love. I had to make the choice that every person my age, every kid my age in 1964 had to make a choice. Which Beatle? Now, I know there's a lot of cool people out there tonight, so you were probably John people. I understand, and I don't hold it against you. And there may even be a few George, shy, retired George people. The Ringo people, I'm sorry, I have very little to say to you. But really, one of the things I'm most grateful for is that I was so incredibly smart when I was 13, and I chose right. So, because not only is he, such a genius, but he's still there, still singing. I've seen him 3 times in the last few years. He's amazing. He goes for 3 solid hours without stopping. He loves what he does. So that was the beginning of 1964. And then in April, something very powerful happened to me. I read the diary of Anne Frank. I had a diary. I started to keep a diary when I was 9. People kept giving me those little 5-year and 1-year diaries. So you have a few tiny little lines to try to fit your day in. And if you have nothing to say, you have to write really, really big to fill up the space. And of course, the diary of Anne Frank was a tremendously moving and powerful experience. But also, I realized that you didn't have to have a 5-year and 1-year diary with a little lock and key. And I walked to the drugstore and I bought a notebook. And at that point, I could write for as long as I wanted, and a monster was unleashed because I kept a diary for the rest of my life. I mean, now I have a blog, but I just never stopped writing. So I thought, to start, I just would like to read a little something from just after I read the Diary of Anne Frank, and I got my first notebook and I started to fill it with my impassioned words. So this was written on April 8th, Wednesday, 1964, and I was 13. Please forgive me, I was 13. Dear Helen, I invented a correspondent, like Anne Frank had Kitty, so I invented a woman called Helen who loved me very much and who wanted to hear every single thing that I wrote. Dear Helen, I'm in a hurry to get this on paper. It'll sound stupid, childish, and completely unbalanced, but I'm madly in love with Paul McCartney, a 21-year-old man whom I have never seen in life, only in hundreds of photos, and don't know. Oh, he's tearing me apart inside. He's a Beatle who I have previously mentioned, but suddenly a passion has been awakened. Oh, Helen, I know it's a teenage crush, like on a movie star, but I do love him so. Oh, I love, 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 love him. I recently saw an article with a picture of his girlfriend, a 17-year-old actress. And oh, how stupid I am to want him so. I mean, if I were a sexy 17-year-old British actress and he just happened to know me, then maybe I'd have cause to adore and desire him. But I'm just a 13-year-old Canadian schoolgirl, nondescript in every way. So hopeless, and yet I adore him with all my heart. Oh, Paul, Paul, Paul. And there's the actual page from the diary. Never in my life did I think I would be receiving applause for my diary. So then, my father made an announcement. My father was a university professor. This was in Halifax, Nova Scotia. And he suddenly announced that he was taking a sabbatical leave and we were going to move to Paris for a year. Now, I don't know about you, but I was a 13-year-old who had just found my group, my kinship group, my fellow Beatlemaniacs. I belonged, I had a group, I was a teenager. The last thing in the world that I wanted to do was go to Paris, where I knew nobody, where I spoke no French, where there would be no hit parade and no peanut butter. However, we went, and it was not an easy year. It was a difficult year. We were not a particularly happy family at that time. And I did go to a French school. I did end up managing to learn French. One of the things is that we weren't actually living in Paris. We were living in a communist suburb south of